What if your mirror isn't just a reflection, but a confession? What if the face you see every morning is hiding a truth you've never dared to speak? There's a ritual, ancient, unspoken, passed down in silence, between broken souls who've dared to face what most spend a lifetime avoiding. It begins when you stop pretending, when you sit alone in the dark, with nothing but your breath and your reflection, and you ask questions no one ever taught you to ask. Not who am I, but what have I buried to become this person? Not what do I want, but what part of me did I have to kill to survive? You see, the mirror doesn't lie, but it doesn't speak either. It waits for your courage to break the silence. Because the shadow in the glass, it isn't evil, it's just honest. Honest about the rage you hide, the guilt you swallow, the dreams you abandoned in the name of survival. And tonight, we won't run from it. We'll walk right into it, armed with 7 questions, 7 blades of truth, each one cutting closer to the self you've forgotten. This is not self-love. This is self-confrontation. Welcome to the mirror ritual.
The world taught you to smile for the camera, to stand straight, breathe deep, fix your posture, mask your pain. You were trained subtly, systematically to present, not to reveal, to polish what's acceptable and bury what's not. And the mirror, it became part of the performance, a rehearsal stage for your face, a silent partner in your act, a glass confessional where no truth is ever spoken aloud. But what if we reversed that? What if tonight the mirror became your witness, not of your appearance, but of your essence? Because somewhere in your timeline, maybe it was childhood, maybe it was heartbreak, you were told that some feelings were too much, some thoughts were wrong, some truths dangerous, and so you hid them. You exiled your chaos. You abandoned the voice inside you that didn't fit the script. That's how a shadow is born. It's not evil, it's the orphan truth, the forgotten parts of you that still scream in silence. And they live right behind your eyes. Every time you look in the mirror, they beg for one thing: to be seen. That's why the mirror ritual isn't about vanity. It's not about aesthetics. It's about intimacy with the self you've never dared to meet. It begins with stillness, not comfort, stillness, because the most sacred confrontations aren't loud. They don't happen under bright lights or in crowded rooms. They happen in the dark, in front of a mirror, when the performance ends and you are finally alone with the one person you've never truly known, yourself. So tonight, don't fix your hair, don't adjust your angle, don't search for beauty. Look for honesty and understand this. Every tear you've ever swallowed, every scream you silenced, every time you nodded when you wanted to collapse, that energy didn't disappear. It became your shadow, and now it's time to call it back. Tonight, you're not here to punish yourself. You're not here to judge. You're here to witness. You are the mirror, and the one being reflected is your soul, unfiltered, unmasked, unafraid. Are you ready to ask the questions you've buried? Because the answers are already inside you, waiting. Her name was Mira, fitting, perhaps, since her name sounded like mirror. But Mira hadn't looked into a real mirror in over 2 years. She wiped the surface. Sure, she brushed her teeth, washed her face, went through the rituals of existence. But she never really looked, because looking meant remembering, and remembering meant bleeding. Mira used to be fire, not the chaotic, reckless kind, but steady, strong, the kind of warmth people gathered around, until the warmth was taken, until the phone call came, until her brother, her twin, died in a car crash. She wasn't supposed to survive. Grief didn't come like waves. It came like a drought. Suddenly there was no laughter, no hunger, no color, only this grayness, this invisible weight pressing on her chest every morning, and this numbness that blurred the edges of reality. Everyone told her to heal, to move on, to forgive fate, but they didn't see what she saw. His face in every reflection, not as a ghost, but as guilt. And so Mira stopped looking, stopped feeling. She wore sunglasses indoors. She avoided birthday candles and polished silver and elevator walls, because any surface that could reflect might also accuse, until one night she couldn't breathe, not from panic, not from pain, but from the unbearable silence inside her. She sat in front of the bathroom mirror. For the first time in years, she let the light be harsh. She stared straight into the eyes of a woman she didn't recognize, and she whispered, "I'm still here, but I don't know who I am anymore." That was the first cut, the first blade of truth. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She asked, "Why did I survive? What part of me died that day? What am I afraid to see?" One by one, the questions came like echoes, and her reflection didn't flinch. It just waited for her to break the silence. So Mira kept asking. She kept breathing, kept shaking, until the grief wasn't this massive monster in the room. It was a small child, hiding afraid, clutching a photo in its trembling hands. And Mira finally reached for it, not to push it away, not to explain it, but to hold it. That night she wrote 7 questions on the mirror, with a red lipstick, not to find answers, but to remember how to speak again. And every night since, she's returned to the ritual, to the silence, to herself, because the mirror didn't show her someone broken. It showed her someone buried, and now she's learning how to dig. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What Mira experienced wasn't madness, it wasn't weakness, it was the return of her shadow. In Jungian psychology, the shadow self is not just a metaphor. It's the invisible mirror, holding every part of you you've learned to reject, your shame, your jealousy, your fear, your rage, even your potential. Yes, especially your potential. Because society doesn't just teach you to hide what's ugly. It often teaches you to dim what's powerful. You're told to be small, to be agreeable, to be easy to digest. So the parts of you that burn too brightly, your intuition, your wildness, your fury, they get buried, and over time you forget they were ever yours. That's what happened to Mira. Her grief wasn't just about her brother. It was about the piece of herself that died with him. The voice that once said, "I matter." The fire that once said, "I'm allowed to feel." Shadow work is the process of calling that voice back. It's the choice to face what you've been taught to fear. Not because it's evil, but because it's true. Jung didn't believe the shadow was a villain. He believed it was a teacher. And the mirror ritual, that's one of the oldest classrooms. When you sit in front of your reflection, unmasked and unscripted, you're not doing a performance. You're holding a conversation with the version of you that never got to speak, the child who cried too loudly, the teenager who loved too deeply, the adult who dared to say no and got punished for it. They're all still there. And they've been waiting for you to stop fixing, stop editing, stop filtering, and just look. Because when you finally see your shadow, not as something broken, but as something silenced, you reclaim your story. You stop being a character written by pain. You become the author. This is the paradox of shadow psychology. The very things you feared the most are the things you need the most. Your anger isn't your enemy. It's the boundary you weren't allowed to set. Your sadness isn't a flaw. It's a mirror for the love you still carry. Your confusion isn't weakness. It's the doorway to a deeper clarity. And your guilt, it's just your soul asking for permission to feel again. That's what the mirror ritual reveals. Not answers, but truths. And the greatest truth of all, you were never broken. You were just unfinished. This is not just a reflection. This is a reckoning. If you're ready to begin, find a mirror. Not the bathroom mirror you glance at in a rush. Find a space where you can sit in stillness, where the lighting is dim but honest, where the silence feels like an invitation, not a threat. Bring a candle if you'd like, a journal, or simply your breath. Now take a seat. Let your phone be silent. Let the world wait and gaze into your reflection, not with judgment, but with presence. This is where it begins. The mirror ritual. 7 questions to face your shadow. Between each question, take a pause. A real one. Let the words echo. Let your soul respond. Question 1. What part of me have I buried to survive? We often silence the boldest parts of ourselves just to be accepted. What fire did you dim to stay safe? What truth did you exile to avoid conflict? Pause and let that memory return. Question 2. When did I learn that my feelings were dangerous? Trace back. Was it your tears, your anger, your joy? Who told you it was too much? Let that moment surface. Don't edit it. Question 3. What am I pretending not to feel? Maybe it's rage, or shame, or loneliness so deep it echoes. What emotion are you avoiding at all costs? Breathe, say its name, even if only in your mind. Question 4. Whose voice still echoes in my silence? A parent, a teacher, a lover. Whose judgments do you carry, even when they're not in the room? Look at your reflection. Whose script are you reciting? Question 5. What truth have I called a lie? Just to cope. Sometimes we tell ourselves, I'm fine, I don't care, it doesn't matter. But what if it did matter? What truth have you buried so deep you forgot it was yours? Question 6. What does my shadow want to say to me? If the part of you you've rejected could speak, what would it whisper? what would it scream? Let it speak. Don't interrupt. Just listen. Question 7. What would happen if I stopped running? Not tomorrow. Not next year. Tonight. What if you just stopped? What part of your soul would finally breathe? Hold that image. Let it settle. Let it stay. Now place your hand over your heart. Whisper this, not for the mirror, but for the one inside it. I see you. I remember you, and I'm not afraid of you anymore. Because the shadow is not your enemy. It's the part of you that stayed awake in the dark, waiting for you to come back. Now that the ritual is complete, don't rush to move on. Don't scroll, don't escape. Sit with the silence, because silence is not emptiness. It's a doorway, and what's waiting on the other side is you. Below are not just questions, they are keys, and if you dare to hold them, they will open doors to truths that have waited too long. Take your time, ask them slowly, and let your soul respond. What fear have I built my entire identity around? We often think fear is something we feel occasionally, but sometimes fear becomes the blueprint, the reason we stay quiet, the reason we overachieve, the reason we keep people out. What would happen if you removed that foundation? Who would you become if fear didn't design you? Let that question sit. Let it disturb you. Let it free you, too. What part of me have I labeled as bad, simply because others couldn't love it? Maybe your sensitivity, maybe your ambition, maybe your fire. Were these really flaws? Or were they just inconvenient for someone else's comfort? Is it possible you were never too much, only too real for a world addicted to masks? Breathe, let that land. 3. Does my shadow hold a gift I've been too afraid to claim? Your darkness isn't just a wound, it's a womb. From it can rise art, vision, voice, power. What are you sitting on that the world is starving for? What truth in you is knocking gently, but relentlessly, waiting to be heard? You don't have to answer. You just have to listen. 4. If I faced my shadow every day, not just tonight, how would my life change? Would you stop apologizing for existing? Would you begin to speak without trembling? Would you finally stop negotiating with your worth? Close your eyes. Imagine a version of yourself that is no longer edited by fear. That version of you exists, and it's closer than you think. These questions don't require perfect answers. They require presence, permission, and patience. Because your shadow doesn't need fixing. It needs witnessing. And maybe for the first time tonight, you've seen it. You've held it. And most importantly, you've stayed. Her name was Celine. She had spent most of her life making herself smaller. Smaller in rooms, smaller in arguments, smaller in her own mirror. She learned early that silence was survival, that being too visible was too dangerous. So she mastered invisibility with a perfect smile, flawless performance, and a soul that whispered only when no one else was listening. But silence has a cost, and Celine was tired of paying it. One night, after watching a video, she lit a candle, closed the door, and stared into her own eyes for the first time in years. They looked haunted, but they also looked hungry, not for approval, not for validation, but for truth. She didn't ask all 7 questions. She didn't need to. She asked one, what would happen if I stopped pretending? And in that moment, something cracked. Not loudly, not violently, but like the first fracture in winter ice, right before the thaw. Tears didn't fall. They erupted, like rain from a sky that had been holding its breath too long. She wept for every version of herself she'd buried. The girl who was told to smile instead of scream. The teen who never spoke up because boys don't like complicated girls. The woman who apologized for taking up space. And through the tears, she saw something. Not a shadow, not a flaw, but a force, a wild, raw, radiant truth that had never stopped waiting for her. She wrote it down that night. Not in a journal, not in her phone, but on the mirror itself with black eyeliner. I'm not broken. I was just edited by fear. The next morning, Celine walked into work. Same hallway, same desk, same cold fluorescent lights. But something had changed. She spoke slower, stood taller, didn't smile when she didn't mean it. And when a colleague interrupted her mid-sentence, she paused, then said, I'm not done speaking. It wasn't loud, but it was sacred, because in that moment, Celine wasn't echoing someone else's voice. She was echoing her own. She had stepped out of her shadow, not to erase it, but to integrate it. And that's what healing looks like. It's not always bright. It's not always soft. Sometimes it's a whisper that becomes a roar. Sometimes it's the quiet reclaiming of a sentence. Sometimes it's just the courage to stay in front of the mirror 5 seconds longer than yesterday. And as she walked away that night, her reflection didn't follow her. It walked beside her. Your darkness is your dawn.
You've just faced your shadow, not in theory, not in a textbook, but in the mirror, in silence, in truth. Tonight, you didn't just watch a video. You stepped into a ritual, a conversation, a reckoning, a return. This is shadow psychology in action. This is the essence of shadow work, to stop running and start listening, to sit with the parts of you that society taught you to fear, and finally say, you are part of me, and I won't abandon you again. From Mira to Celine, from theory to practice, you've walked the circle. You've looked at grief, guilt, rage, silence, and you didn't look away. You dared to ask, what if my darkness is not my downfall, but my doorway? This is not the end. This is integration. This is the beginning of individuation, the Jungian path to wholeness. It's not a one-night event. It's a daily return to truth, to breath, to the mirror. So here's your invitation. Subscribe to UMBRA INSIGHT, not just for content, but for communion. This channel is a space where dark motivation meets real transformation, where shadow psychology is more than a buzzword. It's a mirror for the soul. Here, we honor your rage. We respect your sadness. We empower your darkness. And we remind you, the parts of you you hide hold the key to everything you seek. Let's walk this path together, one reflection at a time. Share this ritual. Comment. Which of the 7 questions hit you the hardest? Revisit it every time you forget who you are. Because healing isn't linear. It's lunar, cyclic, mysterious, real. And if anyone tells you that loving yourself means ignoring your darkness, then they've never met their own. So repeat after me. Embrace your chaos. It's your freedom.